Level 1. Christianity was far more diverse in the beginning. Most people imagine early Christianity as one unified movement, everyone believing the same doctrines, worshiping the same way, reading the same writings, but the moment you step back into the 1st and 2nd centuries, you realize something shocking. Christianity began as a wildly diverse spiritual landscape full of competing ideas, rival interpretations, and groups that barely recognized each other. You had the Jewish Christians, who believed Jesus was the Messiah but followed Torah strictly. They saw the faith as a continuation of Judaism. Then there were the Gentile Christians, shaped heavily by Paul's teachings, who believed the law no longer applied. That disagreement alone created enough tension to fill a library. But it wasn't just two groups. There were the Ebionites, who saw Jesus as a human prophet, the Docetists, who thought he wasn't human at all, the Gnostics, who taught secret revelation, the Marcionites, who rejected the Old Testament entirely, and communities near Egypt and Syria, whose beliefs barely resemble modern Christianity. Later church traditions often soften this chaos. They retell the story as if one true version of Christianity existed from the beginning and everyone else simply strayed. But history shows the opposite. Early followers were trying to understand Jesus in real time, in real cultures, with real disagreements. What makes this level fascinating isn't drama, it's honesty. Christianity wasn't born as a single polished system. It was a movement struggling to define itself, shaped by geography, language, persecution, and debate. And as later leaders worked to unify doctrine, much of this early diversity was downplayed, forgotten, or labeled as heresy. Level 1 reveals a simple truth. Christianity didn't start unified, it became unified. Level 2, Jesus' earliest followers didn't agree on everything. This level surprises people because it's sitting right there in the Bible, yet rarely talked about openly. We're often told that Jesus' first disciples preached one clear message, shared one theology, and walked in perfect unity. But the New Testament itself shows a much more human, much more conflicted reality. Start with Peter and Paul, two giants of the faith. In Paul's own letters, he describes confronting Peter to his face in Antioch over how Gentile believers were being treated. This wasn't a small misunderstanding. It was a public clash about the very identity of the church, whether Gentiles needed to follow Jewish law to be accepted. Then there's Paul and James, who held different views on faith, works, and the continued role of the Mosaic law. Paul argued that salvation came through faith apart from the works of the law. James emphasized that faith without works is dead. These weren't contradictions, but they were different emphases born from different communities. Even the early church in Jerusalem had debates about whether Gentile converts needed circumcision, dietary laws, or full Torah observance. The Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15 wasn't a celebration of unity, it was a crisis meeting to resolve disagreements tearing the movement apart. Later Christian teaching often smooths these tensions out, presenting the apostles as a perfectly aligned team. But seeing their disagreements doesn't weaken the faith, it humanizes it. It shows that even the earliest leaders wrestled with questions, culture, and identity. Level 2 teaches something important. The earliest Christian movement wasn't built on uniformity. It was built on struggle, discussion, correction, and growth. The very things that shaped Christianity into what it is today. Level 3. The Bible didn't fall from heaven, fully formed. Most people imagine the Bible appearing as a complete, bound book, divinely dropped into history, unchanged and uncontested. But the truth is far more complex and far more interesting. The Bible as we know it was formed through centuries of debate, copying, arguing, and refining, a process that early Christians never presented as simple. In the first few centuries, different Christian communities used different collections of books. Some churches read the Shepherd of Hermas publicly as scripture. Others included the Epistle of Barnabas. Some embraced the Book of Revelation, while others rejected it outright. In parts of the East, the Book of Enoch was treated as inspired, while in the West, it was unknown. There wasn't one Bible. There were many Bibles, shaping different Christian worlds. It took hundreds of years for the canon to stabilize. Church councils didn't magically create scripture. They recognized what communities were already using. But different communities were using different books, which meant agreement required long discussion, political influence, theological preference, and sometimes suppression of competing views. Even after the canon was formalized, the story wasn't over. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church still includes Enoch and Jubilees. The Catholic and Orthodox Bibles include the deuterocanonical books. Most Protestant Bibles do not. Each tradition tells a slightly different story, but the truth is the same. The Bible grew over time. This isn't a threat to faith, it's a reminder that Scripture came through real people, real cultures, and real history. And understanding that history doesn't diminish the Bible, it reveals how deeply valued these writings were, and how hard early Christians worked to preserve them. Level 3 shows that the Bible wasn't dropped from heaven, it was shaped on earth. Level 4, how powerful empires shaped Christian doctrine. Most people grow up believing Christian doctrine was formed only through prayer, scripture, and spiritual guidance. But level 4 reveals a deeper, often uncomfortable truth. Politics shaped theology just as much as theology shaped politics. From the moment Christianity collided with imperial power, emperors began influencing the very doctrines believers still repeat today. It starts with Constantine, who legalized Christianity and pushed for unity across the empire. He didn't write doctrine, but he absolutely pressured bishops to settle disputes quickly. The Council of Nicaea wasn't just a spiritual gathering, it was an imperial command to end division. Constantine wanted a stable empire, and a unified church was the easiest way to get it. After him came Theodosius, who made Christianity the official religion of Rome. Under his rule, alternative Christian groups, once just different interpretations, suddenly became heresies punishable by law. Bishops didn't just debate ideas, they had imperial backing to enforce them. Even the decisions about which books were accepted into the Bible often happened in a political atmosphere. Certain writings were promoted because they supported unity, others were pushed aside because they sparked controversy, contradicted bishops, or appealed to groups considered troublesome. None of this means the doctrines were false or artificially invented. It simply shows that Christian history wasn't shaped in a vacuum. It grew in a world of kings, councils, soldiers, and power struggles, where theological debates often had political consequences. Level 4 doesn't attack Christianity, it reveals how deeply human the process was. Empires didn't create the faith, but they influenced which voices rose and which voices faded. The doctrines we know today carry not just spiritual meaning, but centuries of historical decisions, cultural pressures, and imperial influence. Level 5, Christianity's teachings evolved more than people realize. If you ask most believers today, they'll tell you Christianity's teachings have always been the same, unchanged from the time of Jesus until now. But the moment you step back into early Christian history, you discover something far more dynamic. Christian doctrine evolved, shifted, expanded, and clarified for centuries before becoming what we know today. Even core beliefs took time to form. The Trinity, for example, wasn't fully articulated until the 4th century, after decades of fierce debates between theologians. Early Christians believed Jesus was divine, but how that divinity worked was a major argument. Some saw him as subordinate to the Father, others believed he was eternal, others believed he became divine later. The final doctrine took centuries of councils to define. Ideas about heaven and hell also developed slowly. The earliest Christians expected a near-term return of Christ and a restored earth more than a faraway heaven. Concepts of eternal torment, purgatory-like purification, and layered afterlives formed over time through Jewish tradition, Greek influence, and theological imagination. Even teachings on angels, demons, sacraments, and spiritual warfare evolved through centuries of reflection, cultural exchange, and theological refinement. Early Christianity wasn't a fixed system, it was a growing tree, absorbing ideas from Judaism, Hellenistic philosophy, and Middle Eastern spirituality. This isn't a threat to the faith, it's proof of its depth. A belief system that can grow for 2,000 years without breaking shows strength, not weakness. Level 5 reminds us that Christianity didn't start fully formed. It matured, sometimes through debate, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through revelation. What we inherit today is the final chapter of a long, evolving story. Level 6, the lost text that once shaped Christian belief. Level 6 uncovers a truth the modern church rarely emphasizes. Many early Christian texts once shaped real communities, but were later removed, discouraged, or forgotten. These weren't fringe writings. For generations, believers read them, copied them, prayed with them, and considered them spiritually valuable. Take the Book of Enoch, a dramatic vision of angels, judgment, and the heavenly world. It influenced early Jewish belief, shaped early Christian imagination, and is even quoted in the New Testament letter of Jude. For the first Christians in Ethiopia and parts of Egypt, Enoch was scripture. Then there's the Book of Jubilees, which expanded stories from Genesis and added angelic revelations and cosmic timelines. It was cherished by groups like the Essenes and continued influencing Christian writers for centuries. The Shepherd of Hermas was once so beloved that early churches read it alongside the Gospels. Codex Sinaiticus, one of the oldest complete Bibles ever found, actually includes it. The Epistle of Barnabas circulated widely as well, preserved with canonical letters and respected by major leaders. These texts weren't erased maliciously, but as bishops tried to unify doctrine, streamline teachings, and remove confusion, many of these writings were quietly set aside, not banned, just unused. Over time, unused became forgotten. The result? Christianity lost a huge part of its early literary world. The beliefs of the earliest Christians were shaped by far more writings than the modern Bible includes. Level 6 is not about hidden conspiracies. It's about rediscovery, remembering that Christianity's foundation was built from countless voices, stories, and revelations that history later trimmed away. Level 7. Christianity borrowed more than people realize. This final level reveals a truth that surprises people but is well documented. Christianity absorbed ideas, symbols, and language from surrounding cultures, especially Judaism, Greek philosophy, Roman customs, and Middle Eastern traditions. Start with Judaism, the faith Jesus himself practiced. Early Christians borrowed Jewish scriptures, psalms, prayers, symbols, festivals, and prophetic frameworks. Christianity is built on Jewish soil, but the influence didn't stop there. Early Christian thinkers used Greek philosophical terms to express spiritual truths. Words like logos, essence, substance, and nature. The Trinity, for example, uses Greek philosophical categories to articulate its meaning. This wasn't copying, it was translation, expressing divine ideas in the language people understood. Roman influence appears in calendars, structures of authority, church hierarchy, and even certain holidays. As Christianity spread through the empire, it naturally absorbed cultural forms, imagery, and traditions. Then there were Middle Eastern spiritual movements that shaped ideas about angels, demons, cosmic battles, and the afterlife. Ideas visible in the writings of Enoch, Qumran texts, and early Christian apocalyptic literature. None of this weakens Christianity. It shows how adaptable, global, and flexible the faith has always been. A belief system that survives for 2,000 years must interact with the world around it, and Christianity did exactly that. Level 7 reminds us that Christian history isn't isolated. It's a tapestry woven from countless cultures, languages, and traditions. And instead of hiding this truth, understanding it gives us a deeper picture of how Christianity grew from a small movement in Judea into a global spiritual force. Subscribe now for more hidden history, lost scriptures, and deep biblical truths the world never talks about.